Hi, I'm Olivia. This is Mila, and this is my recommendations channel. We're still just doing books because I've got my editing computer and I don't have the skill set yet to like do TV shows and movies and possibly video games. I do a lot of phone gaming. If anybody out there for one of my phone games wants to wants to sponsor me, I would love to do that. That's the only thing I think I found so far that I'd be interested in taking as a sponsorship. But yeah, so today we're going to do the book Catherine House by Elisabeth Thomas. Now, I wrote scripts for all these other books. They're sitting over here for me to get to. I've been wrestling with the script forever because I just can't get a handle on what I want to say, because I don't want to spoil stuff, but the spoilers are so intertwined with the rest of the book that I think I kind of need to. In this book, towards the end, Inés Murillo, our protagonist, is described as not having learned analytical skills and looking at the world sideways. And I'm not sure if that's why I'm having trouble writing this, if it's because Inés's mind isn't up for this, or if it's because my mind isn't. I'm not sure yet. So we're just going to go back to how we used to do it, where I was just kind of spitballing. So we're going to spitball today. Basically, like I said, the protagonist is Inés Murillo. She attends a school called Catherine House. Now, Catherine House is accredited as a university, but it isn't really. It's something else. It's a kind of choose your own course of study kind of a thing, near as we can tell. Basically, you pick a course of study and they help you develop a curriculum around it, mostly, kind of, I think. They're really not, we're never told this is the course of study she needs to follow. She ends up studying art history, and after I finished reading this, I'm like, art history? I would have loved art history. In fact, that might be something I'm going to recommend. I'm going to do on my channel farther down the path, because there's like a lot of art I really love. Anyway, so, but I'm like, art history, never studied that, but that's what she ends up studying. But the main thing that Catherine House does is what's referred to as the new materials discipline. And new materials is something called plasm, like plasma without the A. And we get hints about what plasm is and what they're doing about it and what's going on with it and other things throughout. We'll go into what, we're going to find out we find out at the end of the book, kind of, I think, mostly what the plan is, but don't quote me. So Inés comes in, and she no longer speaks to her mother. They had some kind of falling out. We never find out what, as far as I can remember. I've read this book like 3 times now, and I'm like, but she's just recently had a traumatic experience. Now, when she was in high school, one of her favorite teachers, her chemistry teacher, said she'd be a fantastic fit for Catherine House, and he arranged for her to apply, and there's all sorts of like tests you have to do and interviews you have to have, and she goes through all these things and gets accepted. Now, the thing about Catherine House is it's a 3-year program, has 3 trimesters. So you have, like a spring trimester, fall trimester, a winter and a spring, or, one of those. And you never leave the campus. The only people who leave the campus are people who've been thrown out. When she gets there, like I said, she's still reeling from this trauma that she just went through, and she really isn't buying what Catherine House is selling. She's like, no. And her roommate, Barbara Pierce, who goes by the name of Baby, really has bought into it. The only thing she's ever wanted to do is study plasm, is go into the new materials discipline. She describes it as everything. She says, plasm is everything. We will find out later what this means. But anyhow, so Inés isn't buying this, and she goes into how crummy how run down the school is, how iffy this food is. It's like, ooh, kind of, I mean, it's food. I'll eat it, but I'm not going to be crazy about it. She makes friends with another group of people. I don't remember what Nick was doing, but Nick is the son of a rich family and he's there, I guess, to reject whatever they're doing. The graduates of Catherine House tend to become big movers and shakers, we're told. They become Supreme Justices, 2 presidents. Now, Thomas went to Yale, and if you know anything about Yale, you know that Yale's that kind of school. Most of the presidents, a lot of presidents attended there and things. So there's Nick, and there's Theo, who wants to go into the new materials concentration. There's Baby, who also wants to go in the new materials concentration. There's Anna, who also wants to go in the new materials concentration. There's Yaya, who also doesn't really buy what Catherine House is selling, but they've got this huge endowment, and so attendance there is free. Well, we're told it's because of the endowment. It may be, but you see, they're not just studying plasma at the school. They're also experimenting on the students, as it turns out. And so when you sign up for Catherine House, you're signing up to be a lab rat, but they don't really tell you that's what you're going to be doing. So we go through Inez's educational history here. She, her whole education, well, most of her education, we'll get into that later, but she comes in and they encourage their students to let it all hang out, to have sex, and am I allowed to say that? I don't know, to engage in fun times and alcohol use and things like that. But they're also expected to work real hard, and Inez is still reeling from this trauma, and so she goes hardcore for the partying time, but not so much for the schooling. And then they eventually tell her that they're going to throw her out if she doesn't straighten up and fly right, and basically tell her that if she just attends her classes for the rest of the semester, they'll keep her in. Now that's an interesting, she doesn't really even have to do any work. She just has to show up, and she will pass her classes and be able to stay. And of course, I'm like, they're experimenting on these kids, and they want to keep her for a reason. We will find out. So at one point, they there are these things called plasm pins, and plasm pins attach to the head, like the forehead and back, and then there's like some that attach to the abdomen, and we don't really know what they do. We find out later, but the first time they do this with these students, they all go in and they have this like little ritual dinner, kind of cakes and something else. I can't remember what the beverage is, but it's just a little snack, and then they do this thing, and they do all this chanting. The house is in the woods, I'm in the house, my hands are on the table, all this other stuff that just kind of goes on and on and on. Well, Inez's plasma pin on her head comes detached. It sticks on, and it comes detached, and she, the student that's supposed to reattach it, she kind of shakes her head that she doesn't want to, and he doesn't. Later on, the director of the school, Victoria, sees this. She notices this, and this sets up, I think, other things later. So as the book progresses, they're given points, and supposedly you can use those points to call home, but it seems like nobody ever does. I don't know if it's exorbitantly expensive, or if the students just don't care to do that. I don't know. But it never actually happens. They have no contact with the outside world. In fact, at one point, they teach Inez how to ride a bicycle. They find a bicycle, and they teach her how to ride, and she gets too close to the gate, and the security guard freaks out, and he's like real scary, and she kind of panics. And so, as the book progresses, she decides that she's going to actually apply herself, and she decides to go into, like I said, art history. Inez gets put in what's referred to as the Tower, which is a place where you are held inside this little room, and you aren't allowed to have clothing. And they feed you on a schedule, and they eventually somebody comes in with the plasma pins again. This time she consents to it, and they do the house is in the woods. The woods are in the house. The people are I'm in the house. My hands are on the table. All those things, and she suddenly feels brand new again. And this begins, kind of an interesting part because, like I said, she wasn't really buying what they were selling at first. And this begins kind of a sea change that way. She eventually becomes more into what the school's offering. And she applies herself and she does well in her classes, and um, they tell her she needs to learn. One of her friends, tells her that she needs to learn German, and she learns German. She starts taking German classes. She has lots of sex with all sorts of people that just, you know, it's like, oh, and she was sleeping with this person and she was sleeping with that person. She gets into a romantic relationship with Theo. Now, Theo also seemed to be a little bit rebellious about what was going on. Oh, I missed something. Okay, this is the problem with spitballing. Her roommate, Baby, remember her? She cheated on a chemistry test. She was so desperate to get into the program that she was left alone with the answer key. And so she read the answer key. So she gets put in the tower. Only she never comes back. She dies while she's in the tower. And we never find out what happens to her body. Well, at that point, we never find out what happens to her body. And they have a little memorial service on campus, and everybody cries. But they never give Inez another roommate, so she's got a room to herself. She's got a single for the rest of the time she's at Catherine House. And as they go through the program, they start looking down on the kids that are coming in. When they're second years, they're like, "Oh, look at those babies!" When the new first years come in, things like that. So Inez gets involved with Theo, her friend Theo, who wanted to do the new materials concentration. And Theo's all, "I'm never going to do as well as I should." The director is M. Neptune. All the professors and things at the school have the initial have M instead of Mr., Ms., Mrs., whatever. And M. Neptune is in charge of the new materials concentration. And he's like, "I'll never be accepted by M. Neptune. I'm not good enough," and all this other stuff. And I'm not sure to what extent he really believes that, and what extent that was sort of a line he was feeding Inez. Because, well, this is the part where the spoilers really hit hard, okay? Because you see, at one point he tells Inez admits that she was thinking about seducing Theo in order to find out what the heck the new materials concentration is, because she's curious about it. And when they get together, he says the sentence, "You'll be beautiful forever," soon after they get together. And, well, she finds out that he's been lying about not being accepted by M. Neptune. In fact, he has been. And she finds the key card. And one night she sneaks in there to find out what's going on. And this is when we find out what happened to Baby's body, because they've got Baby in a box inside there. There also was another student they put in the box a long time ago, and he's now out wandering around campus. He was in a box in there for 6 years, and he's now wandering around campus just empty, vacant. No, he interacts with the environment, but doesn't really interact with people. And, well, Theo gets put in. There's a rabbit that's one of the test subjects, and she lets the rabbit go. And Theo gets in trouble for letting the rabbit go, because she used his key card to get in there, and she wore his sweatshirt while she was in there, his hoodie. So they thought he did it, and he kept telling people, no, it was Inez. It was Inez. She did it. And so eventually, Theo, Inez goes and confesses, and she's like, "Yeah, it was me." And so she gets sent to the tower, and she is left there. Victoria, the head of the department, comes in. The head of the school comes in and says, "You can become part of the new materials concentration. We'd like to have you." And Inez is like, I don't have any science background. I would need to. And she said, oh, yeah, you'd have to do a lot of catching up, but we really would like you to stay and do this. Except it turns out they don't mean that they want her to study new materials. They want to put her in a box like they did with Baby. And needless to say, Baby apparently was really enthusiastic about being in a box because she's furthering the research. Inez, not so much. Inez has fallen in love. She's drunk in the Kool-Aid, the metaphorical Kool-Aid, and has fallen in love with the school. It is her home now. But she doesn't want to stay under those circumstances. So one of her friends sneaks her a lockpick kit. She's been learning to pick locks. That was one of the things that Baby taught her early on. And she sneaks out, and they have arranged for her to sneak out in one of the trucks that's going to go out and get supplies. And they pull up at a gas station, and she hears footsteps. And the woman who drives the truck has a limp. These footsteps don't have a limp. And she throws open, somebody throws open the truck, and she's blinded by the daylight, and that's where the book ends. And it's this fantastic sort of Lady the Tiger ending. Who opens the door that doesn't have a limp? Was Victoria inside the truck the whole time? And she's come to take, and this is all a setup, and she's come to take Baby back? Did the friend who was going to help her come and meet the truck? We don't know. We never find out. But the thing that's interesting, though, is that at one point Victoria says that they want the whole world to end up like that kid that was in the box, where you don't have any individualism or anything else. You just perform tasks and that's it. You don't have any. And that's, plasm is everything. Basically, near as I can tell, these people have this guy, Sandy, has no persona because he's become one with the universe. And that's what Baby wants. Baby wants that, to achieve that sort of literal Zen sort of, like I said, one with everything thing. And they want to do that with Inez. Is she going to end up in a box? And if so, what would happen? Is she going to eventually become vacant and one with the universe? Or is she going to find a way out? We'll never know. This is where the book ends. It's great. But, like I said, I was having a hard time going, well, see, there's these, and then there's the Coming In, which is the one where they put the plasm pins on the first years. And now, but that's going to be spoiler for what's going on later on. And then they put her in the tower, and then, no, that's going to be a spoiler. And then Baby disappears, and they tell her she's dead. They tell everybody she's dead. No, that's going to end up being a spoiler for her being in the... So I'm like, okay, forget it. I'm just going to... we're just going to go whole hog on the spoilers. So that's basically my reaction to Catherine House. I love it. It's very dark academia. It's very, mysterious and what's going on here, and atmospheric and kind of, creepy. One of the things that I mentioned early on is that Inez says that the food's not very good and the place is run down. As the book progresses, she notices that less and less, which I found interesting. She starts talking about luxurious rooms that they were staying in and the gorgeous rich food. And there's a throwaway line in here where she talks about, despite all the rich food we've been eating, we're losing a lot of weight. And it's like, because the food is still the unpleasant, unappetizing stuff you were eating before you became one with before you accepted what's going on in Catherine House. And it's things like that. There's she and her friends find all sorts of things. They buy all sorts of stuff. They start out with you have a t-shirt, you have t-shirts and jeans and white cats, and that's it. That's the uniform. And of course, as things go on, they get points and they can trade them for clothing and things like that. But in addition to being able to do that, they also lose their individuality. When we meet uh, Baby has smuggled in a snail that she found in her front yard, and they're keeping it in a tank in their bathroom. And Baby freaks out when they're going to inspect the rooms, and Baby freaks out and um, kills the snail. And it's a really traumatic experience. It's a really, really traumatic scene. It really is. And we don't see the serial killer. We just see her holding his little corpse. After Billie Jean is what they named the snail, and she's holding Billie Jean's corpse inside I think it's a handkerchief, and it's really traumatic. It's real simple. It's real traumatic, but she freaks out. She destroys it because this is so important to her. Theo, when we first meet him, he's got a Discman hidden under his basket, under his mattress, and he's listening to music, and he's got a picture of his grandmother from home, and he doesn't. And later on, when she finds the key card to M. Neptune's lab, the Discman and the picture are both gone. So gradually these kids are being allowed to express themselves in terms of their fashion or whatever, but they're also in a way losing their identity, losing their originality and their personality. Another thing that sticks out to me is now I've got Hello 12, Hello 13, Hello Love from a chorus line stuck in my head, because thinking about this always does that to me, because they're sold the story of being movers and shakers and important and all that other stuff, but as graduation nears, Diego's like, what am I going to do when I get out of here? Am I going to end up just pushing papers in an office somewhere? We never know, because the book ends after the day after graduation. So her friends, except for Baby, who's in the box, and Theo, who's staying because the new materials concentrators stay forever, pretty much. But everybody else has gone on to their new lives somewhere else, doing something else. So, it's just kind of neat that, it's like, but he's all like, what am I going to do? Am I going to have a career? Am I just going to push pencils? And I'm like, but, you were sold this big, fancy movers and shakers, powerful people lifestyle when you signed up for the school. But it looks like the school can't provide that, even though it's supposedly that's what you go there for. And it was just really interesting. I just really, really enjoyed this book. Like I said, I've read it 3 times. It's not... Later on, we're going to do The Lost Story by Meg Schaffer. Schaffer? I don't know how it's pronounced. I used to work with somebody whose name was spelled the same way. She pronounced it Schaefer. It looks like it's Schaffer. But yeah, we're going to do that later. And that's one of the ones I have a script written. And that's another one like this where I'm going to look something up and then suddenly get and realize I'm reading the book again. What did I recently do? I recently did one of the other ones that does that to me every time. So it's one of those. It's engrossing. I love it. It's really creepy. I'm sorry about all the spoilers, but like I said, I've been wrestling with this for months, trying to figure out how to do this without. And then she goes to school and she almost fails out. They find out a way for her to stay. And of course, the plasm thing is why they want her to stay. But I can't mention that because that's a spoiler. And then she decides to major in. She goes to the tower, and they do pin her with the plasm pins, and she decides to choose art history. But it's like, there's just so much stuff going on with Sandy and Baby and Theo and Victoria and M. Neptune and all her other friends and everything else, and I'm like, it's just a mess. And like I said, I don't know whether it's my brain being unable to do analytical thinking like Victoria accuses Inez of, or if that's just because that is how Inez is, and I'm picking up on the way it's supposed to work. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. I guess that's going to be it for now. As always, if you know of any books that you think I'd like to read, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Almost everything behind me will eventually be covered. You can probably zoom in on them and go, ooh, what is that there? I'll probably mention them. I'll probably cover them all at some point. Um, but yeah, if you think of anything, let me know. Uh, Feel free to like, subscribe, leave comments. If you like this and you want to recommend to somebody else, that would be great too. I will talk to you later. And next up is going to be, I've got 4 more books that I've written scripts for. So we'll do those, and then I've got another 2 books that I've read that I need to write scripts for. So I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.